My shoulders, knees, and toes, my bones, your music gets me through the highs and lows. My head, shoulders, knees, and toes, my bones, you keeping me from feeling all alone. I've been praying to 1,000 different stars, to 1,000 different arms, till I found you. I've been chasing by 1,000 different hearts, so 1,000 million hours. Now I found you. My nights will never be the same again. I got you running through my veins. I feel it in my head, my shoulders, knees, and toes, my bones. Your music gets me through the highs and lows. My head, my shoulders, knees, and toes, my bones. You keeping me from feeling all alone.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. First of all, I'd like to wish you a happy new year for 2021, full of love, fun, peace and happiness, and above all, a good health for all of you. We are going to organize throughout the year a series of webinars around ACF, Asset and Consumer Finance, to present our Sopra financing platform and our service model strategy. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, James Powell, who's Executive VP and Head of ACF. He was recently one of the main speakers at the FLA Motor Finance Conference, and it's our pleasure to start this series of webinars with him and a remarkable topic, SaaS for Automotive Finance. James, floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabian. I'll try to make it remarkable, maybe a bit difficult. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. As Fabian says, I want to take you through the topic you see on the screen, which is SaaS for automotive finance. I'll explain that as I go along. And I've based this upon a presentation that, as Fabian said, I did to the motor industry or automotive finance industry in the UK recently. So it's very much aimed at a business orientation. So I'll try to take you through that. Let me just do a click on the screen. Okay, so I'll first give you a little bit of context from an SBS perspective, and then we'll get into the heart of SaaS. And again, I'm focusing on the SaaS delivery model in the context of the automotive finance business, and I'm talking about the journey that these types of companies, our customers, the lenders in that space, can have towards SaaS, drawing out some themes around the applicability of SaaS and the adoption potentially going forward. And then we'll finish off just by talking about some of the benefits that our customers can get, the finance companies. So firstly, in terms of the context within inside SBS, as most of you will know, we've created a division called ACF, stands for Asset and Consumer Finance. And that is, largely speaking, a business that is set up to deliver SFP to automotive finance, equipment finance, and consumer finance. And this, as I say, this business unit has been set up specially to serve that market. Consumer finance is the reason we've brought that into the asset and automotive finance is it's often the place where some of the large banks place their automotive finance portfolios. And it's very much a global business. That's really important when we think about delivering solutions to large organizations. It's a market where we have lots of global companies, the likes of BMW and Daimler and Toyota and some of the big banks, Crédit Agricole and so on. Very much a global business, but a real broad range of different clients within that, from small to very big, acting in different markets across the globe. And it's a very fast changing market and growing market. And then also from our perspective, the reason we think SaaS is very applicable is firstly from on our side, we see it as being a way to grow the business and drive growth and margin. I'll come back to that a little bit later on, and that's largely based upon a recurring revenue model, very different commercial model. And also we see that the market is increasingly looking for this type of solution. And so, as I say, I think the context for us is that the market wants it, needs it, and it also drives the things that we want to do to grow our business. So thinking about it now, just in terms of more of the business side of things, I've defined some problem statements here from our customers' perspective. The first thing, as I said, is it's a very fast changing market, and lots of these organizations are going through big digital transformations, as the more general banking and financial services industry is. And what that's doing is accelerating the need for big re-platforming projects where they're replacing the back office systems and many systems around it. And we at Sopra Banking are involved in lots of those types of transformations for our customers. But with such projects comes cost and risk and disruption to business. So there's a real focus on ensuring that things are done in a timely fashion, reducing cost and reducing risk. And I've said there at the bottom that in some cases we've seen situations where the total cost of ownership of the system, because there could be such a big project in the first place, doesn't really stack up with the overall economics that the customer is trying to look for. So thinking about the solution and drilling a little bit into SaaS, and I'll try and break this down if I can. There's quite a lot of information on the screen. So firstly, at the top, dispelling some myths around SaaS. It's a very, very commonly talked about topic in the IT industry. And what I wanted to say is it's not just about hosting solutions in the cloud. Yes, it is a key component of SaaS is in the cloud, but just because a solution or a software product like SFP is hosted in the cloud doesn't mean to say SaaS. I'll come on to that in a minute. And similarly, people think of it as being a light version of the system. It can be, and that comes down to how you configure the system, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite. And it's not just about having a subscription model. So what is it then? The first thing to say is that SaaS really is a full life cycle delivery model. Everything from the way it changes everything from the way you sell, market and sell the system, the way you deliver it from a project perspective, and the way that you then run and operate it. It's a complete full end-to-end life cycle. It really does rely upon cloud native, and by that I mean leveraging cloud infrastructure to deliver, and also leveraging cloud services wherever possible to be able to deliver things in a fast fashion and leverage all those new technologies in the cloud. And also it does require done properly, a subscription model. Normally a usage-based subscription model, so you're paying for what you use. I'll come back to that in a second. And it does involve having a very strict approach to the way that you manage your software product, by firstly the way you manage the standardization of that product, so a single product for multiple customers, multi-tenant type of application, and also the way that you manage a pre-configuration. And the key for having true SaaS is that you don't have any deviation from that standard model. And as I alluded to earlier on, it requires a completely different operating model, which is very big when you consider the market we're in, that the customer has to change its mindset. And I guess the best example that most of us would be aware of is Salesforce, of a genuine SaaS. And if you think about anybody who uses Salesforce, if you buy Salesforce, you buy a monthly license to it. It's individual people, so that then becomes the volume metric. But what you're buying is a standard product, and what you're then able to do is to do lots of things in terms of configuring Salesforce and then buying services around it from Salesforce or from external partners to plug in and build out the solution. So think Salesforce when you think about SaaS. And in terms of what are the benefits at the high level? Well, the first thing is if you get it right, it's about fast time to market, time to value. So what we're trying to do is to remove those large projects at the beginning, get the system live as quickly as possible, and therefore deliver value quickly for the customers. And then ultimately about lowering the overall total cost of ownership, which again goes hand in hand with the project, but also, as I'll get into a little bit later on, speaks to the operating model and how the software is run. One of the other major benefits is that it gives the customer, or our customer, an evergreen software package. no need for upgrades in the way that we're used to traditionally with large enterprise applications, where you have to go through migration and upgrade projects, which can be disruptive and costly for the customer. That all goes away in a SaaS environment. And then the other thing, which is kind of less known, is if you do it right with pre-configuration of the application, simplification, if you like, it lowers the knowledge bar, is the way I put it. It reduces the training overhead needed, because you're talking about a pre-configured, agreed version of the application. And so therefore it just gives the end customer much more agility in how they can firstly implement the solution and then build upon top it with external services being plugged in from different places. And then the final piece, I think, is a big benefit both to Sopra and our customers, is it encourages a partnership approach between the software vendor and the lender, and I think that's an important part. And I've come from a business where we've been an ASP provider and moving into SaaS, and that it makes you get very close to your customers. So the question I wanted to ask here is knowing that Salesforce is a horizontal market, and whilst it's quite complex, it's a big horizontal market where you can see a SaaS offering being very successful, as Salesforce is. Is it applicable in a complex vertical like auto finance, and more broadly equipment and consumer finance? So that's the question I want to get into now. So the first thing to think about is that applicability, and again, a few statements to make here in auto finance. We believe it's increasingly applicable for auto finance generally, but possibly right now only certain cases. But the thinking is that as we move through and companies become more mature, SaaS offerings become more mature, and importantly, lenders and banks, finance companies look to try and simplify and standardize, then it becomes more applicable as time goes on. Certainly, right now applicable to small companies and startups who can benefit from low cost of ownership and fast time to market, but also seeing even greater applicability with larger companies. And to illustrate that, from some of the experience we've had to date, we initially developed this offering, it began targeted at small lenders and startups a few years ago. And that was the thinking, is that, you know, for those time to market, low cost of ownership, you will target those types of organizations. So they're looking for the time to value, looking for the low entry cost, particularly in the case of a startup organization where they have a business plan and they want to have their cost base move in line with the business plan and the revenue coming in. That was very important. But also people looking for utility computing. So if they don't use it, they don't want to pay for it at all. Lower levels of commitment at the beginning, and we've certainly seen in our recent dealings with some companies in the US and here in Europe that people are really attracted by having a short contract with low commitment. So we're taking a bet with our customer in that case, but that's really, we think, the way that the market is going. The interesting thing then is that as those companies grow and mature, you can take that SaaS model that you implement with a startup small company and then build it out as it grows. And then the larger companies are looking for slightly different benefits. So they're looking for evergreen, as I mentioned earlier, looking for overall total cost of ownership savings on both the setup and the run. And they're looking to be able to scale that business and drive standardization as they go through. But the interesting thing for us when we really got into this was something in the middle, which is these, what I've described as small subsidiaries of large lenders. So when you think about someone like a BMW or a Daimler or a Toyota, they're big companies and they've got lots of big markets like the UK and France and Germany and US, China, but they've also got lots of small markets where perhaps the economics don't match up for an enterprise application. So the interesting thing for us was that our first customer was BMW. So we'd implemented in 8 countries, UK, France, Switzerland, and a fairly large Central European hub. But the economics just didn't match up for Greece. They needed something fast. They needed something that they could manage in a low-cost way. So we implemented a SaaS solution in the cloud, pre-configured, worked with BMW on that concept and implemented it for them. So that was a bit of a surprise to us because that wasn't where we'd targeted it originally. And what these guys are looking for is a real combination of the big company, small company, because they're looking for the benefits of all. Now, the big difference between a country like Greece for BMW versus a startup finance company is they're not necessarily going to grow in the same way, but they're still looking for evergreen software and low total cost of ownership. So kind of moving on to what I've described here as readiness, is how ready is the market, how ready are the market on the supply side, our side, and on the lender side. I think it goes without saying, if you don't have the right offering, the right software product, and the right operating model in place on the supplier side, on our side, then that's the important thing to be able to set up a SaaS business. And on the lender side, I think there's some practical things, but there's a mindset thing as well. They need to be aware of the benefits of it, because the first thing that happens when you tell a bank, well, we're going to give you this standard product, and they start thinking about, is it a light version? And so you have to sell the concept of the evergreen piece and talk to them about the lower total cost of ownership in detail for them to understand. And I think the mindset thing is also something that Fabian and I have been talking about to the market over the last few years, is they have to have the adopt mindset of adopting the standard software versus adapting it. And the other point I'm making here is I think that the more sophisticated needs, if you implement a standard solution, you can still manage the more sophisticated, complex needs by bringing in different services in and around the application. So it doesn't preclude large, complex organizations, but you still stick to your very strong core in the middle of it all. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but the idea here is just to pull out some of those points, is that the software provider, so we as SBS within SFP, need to have a clearly defined baseline configuration for what we call market segments. So a market segment may be used vehicle funding in the UK, or it may be equipment finance in the Netherlands, or it may be floor plan in the US. And what we do is we define what is necessary for the baseline of that market, and then that becomes the core product baseline for that individual market segment. So that's a really important concept. And as you can imagine, then we start to build more baselines as we grow and target different organizations. But then you also have available a suite of additional services that may vary from place to place when you're talking about different geographies. So that may be plugging into market infrastructure, and it's also speaks to the operating model and the support model you have. So it may be that some customers are happy to have a very tightly run operation with no support and no help desk, just basic help desk, and others might want to pay for 24/7 help desk on top. So it's functional services, but also operational services. And we have to adopt a real agile operating model where we implement continuous development, delivery, and a DevOps approach. That becomes really important in terms of the software readiness. And then the other thing is that it impacts the way you sell the software and the way that you build the contract, because you need to clearly define the scope and the SLA. And that's very different in our experience from what it is in an enterprise on-premise license type of environment. And then on the lender side, then as I mentioned, they need to embrace the standardization, and that can be a big mindset change particularly for large organizations. And something that we all know is a key success factor in projects is to challenge challenge the existing processes and work more towards adopt rather than adapt. And then the final point there is to really, there is a difference in terms of the way that they're buying the solution, because they're essentially switching from capital expenditure to operating expenditure. So that mindset needs to be in place as well. And then I would say the real key drivers for the readiness of both the software provider and the market is there needs to be a mature SaaS delivery model. So we need to have a mature piece of software that operates in the given market. And then there's the simplification of the business model is the real driver on the customer side. So continuing on the SaaS journey through into adoption. So the point here is that I think that the adoption is going to accelerate as two things happen. One is that everyone becomes more confident in the SaaS model in this complex environment, because the resistance in years gone by has been what I said is a simpler version of the system delivered in this way, standardized way, is not applicable to a complex market. Well, it is, but it's about the maturity and the competence within our organization, but also then the confidence of the market and the customers to be able to adopt it. So that confidence and competence applies both to the software provider and to the lender. But it's also a component of back office complexity being simplified. So when you look at it from the individual pieces, the SaaS maturity, obviously the product needs to be able to manage the business requirements, the fundamental business requirements in a given market. So it needs to be mature. It needs to manage the regulatory compliance, which is obviously a big thing in our industry, and it needs to leverage all the infrastructure to be able to deliver it quickly and be able to manage it in a cost-effective way. And then the business model on the customer side needs to be simple and it needs to be adopting. And the next illustration is designed to show you that we think that as time goes on, as clients on the lender side want to simplify their business process, and as the maturity of the SaaS model increases, you're going to get this sweet spot where it's going to be a real wave of pressure to move more towards SaaS just because of all the benefits that come with it. And I think it's fair to say, I mentioned earlier on that the BMW was an SFP wholesale piece, and our thinking at the moment is that SFP wholesale, the wholesale market, given its kind of simpler requirement and the drive for standardization in wholesale, is absolutely applicable now and will only continue to be that way. So a lot of the effort in our product roadmap is about moving SFP wholesale more towards SaaS away from ASP. There's still a question mark for us over the retail market in terms of whether these big organizations really do want genuine SaaS, or whether there's too much complexity and too much need for change in there. But certainly having SaaS as a target and moving along that continuum, I think, is something that we've definitely set within our strategy. So I just wanted to finish off just by rounding off on the benefits, really. I think, simply put, buying a core system as a utility lowers the cost and risk. I don't think anybody would argue against that. It also speeds up time to market and improves agility. If we as the supplier are able to work with a customer with the right mindset, the benefits are obvious. And we believe it could be a real game changer in the market. If we're ahead in this curve of moving to SaaS, no one else does it really. We've not seen anybody doing it in the market. If we can get ahead, we think we can drive the market in that direction. And we strongly believe it is scalable. And just to illustrate some of these pieces in terms of just TCO, from a business scope and volume perspective, you can see there we're saying, well, the traditional model is we sell everything, we sell all our modules. Well, this allows you to break it down into a core and then some services around it. So why pay for everything when this is the customer's view? Why pay for everything when you can pay for small amounts, driving that flexibility, agility and scalability? And then from a setup perspective, I've already covered it, but pre-configuration means reduction in project timeline, smaller projects. And just to give you some numbers, we've worked previously in terms of months and years when we're defining projects. We're now talking in terms of weeks and days. Our last implementation, which went live in December, was done in 6 weeks. And now we're talking to a customer about doing it in less than a week. Now, obviously, there's quite a lot that goes into the preparation around that, but you can see the benefit that we can then put in our value proposition to the customer. And the overall objective, whether it's a realistic objective or not, is to have no project. And interestingly, we called the initiative, the program inside of Sopra has been called Project Zero, and that's meant to say we want 0 implementation days. And then finally, on the run side of things, ultimately this can drive overall reduced operating costs because there's not costly upgrades. The pay-per-use model, if built correctly and fitting the customer's needs, is extremely cost efficient as well. Something like the COVID crisis tells the story. If someone like BMW is buying a license and they got fixed maintenance, then they got fixed maintenance whatever the market conditions. Whereas in this scenario, the fees that they pay go up and down based upon the business they do. So that's attractive to the end customer as well. And then, as I say, the reduced cost of upgrades and general internal IT costs as well, because the the supplier, the SaaS provider, takes a lot of that pain away from them. So the thought I would leave you with, I think, is that in auto finance and beyond, across all the ACF markets we're in, I think what we're aiming for is to introduce a Salesforce type model, which we think, as I say, is a real game changer. So that's all I wanted to say to you today. I don't know, Fabian, if we have any time for questions, or whether that was intended, or whether we're just going to give everybody 6 minutes back in their day. You're on mute, Fabian.
Yeah, questions can be written, and we have already 2 questions. I don't know if you can see them, James, otherwise I will read them.
Let me just see if I can find them. Give me a second. No, I don't see them, Fabian, so you may have to.
The first one is from Merich. What is the roadmap and timetable for the SaaSification of SFP retail and user solution plan to SaaSify, Busysoft, etc.?
So firstly, Happy New Year, Merich, and I can always rely on you for a difficult question, so thanks for that. So the SaaSification, so the point that I made there towards the end with the question mark about retail and SaaS, it is driving us to, if you think about where we are with SFP retail, we've come from an on-premise model largely with some managed services wrapped around it. So the target for us in the short term, and when I say short term, I'm talking the next 12 to 18 months, is to do all the fundamentals to bring an ASP, a really solid, robust ASP offering to market. And that will be doing a kind of MVP, minimum viable product on that, so that we can put all the learnings we have from SFP wholesale around what you need to do to deliver an ASP model where we're hosting it, we're switching over to a subscription-based commercial model, but we're not going down the route of saying one version for all customers. And we think, firstly, that's too far away for us just in terms of our product strategy right now. But also, as I said earlier, I'm not sure the market wants it. So I'll answer the question in terms of ASP and say we're looking at an 18-month sort of time frame to bring that to market. And then with wholesale, we are really pushing to SaaS, and that's just an ongoing thing. And we've already got 2 customers live and 3 or 4 in the pipeline. So hopefully that answers your question.
Last question. Do you find that the adopt versus adapt is more difficult in different regions?
Yes. Anyone who's been involved in this, and I include you in that, Fabian, knows that it's a difficult. Everybody talks about adopt because everybody knows it's the right thing to do. Culturally, some regions are more open to it than others. I would say the bigger influence is just the mentality inside an organization and the ability of senior executives, which normally do agree with the adopt approach, to be able to filter that thinking down into a project. So I would say there probably are some regional variations, different markets, but largely speaking, it's more down to the culture and mentality of the client and whether they've been through a big, messy, expensive, risky, failed project before, because that's what drives it, is trying to adapt. So we're always looking for the telltale signs of someone who's willing and able to adopt, and I think it's the job of ourselves to drive that forward, regardless of where that customer is and what they do.
Yeah, I will just add, I definitely think it depends more of the customer than the region. That's almost what you said. Yeah. Next question, Bruno Cambounet. Thank you, James. Have you developed a TCO calculator or anything such to help the sales to demonstrate the TCO cost reduction flexibility? No,
and that's a great question, and we need to. I mean, the TCO improvements are obvious. We haven't had enough experience of pure SaaS at the moment versus ASP versus on-premise to do the calculations, but we need to. And what we now have is some good, solid case studies. BMW is obviously a great name. Our second customer is a very small equipment finance company in Netherlands, but we've got the data now, and we'll be able to build the data out over the next 12 months to be able to drive that type of TCO calculator. So the simple answer is no, but absolutely we need it. We need to do these analysis, and then we need to leverage it from a sales and marketing perspective. So watch this space, Bruno.
Eric Brennan, above SaaS for APAC, is it planned to set up BPO services for customer?
Not to this point. We've had some requests come in from a number of customers in RFP processes about it. So it's definitely something. Obviously, we've got a great deal of experience and knowledge inside Sopra Steria around BPO. It's something I think personally that we should drive forward. At this moment in time, we haven't put it as a major stream in the ACF strategy, but something that we think about more opportunistically around customer opportunities.
And the last one, explain Evergreen a little bit more, please.
Okay.
How can there be no software upgrades? Surely customers want to test any new release from us.
Okay, so again, what I would
From
encourage.
Jason, sorry.
From
Jason Cruz.
Okay, Jason. So what I would encourage you to think about, I don't know if you have any experience of using Salesforce, but you'll get messages from Salesforce every now and then saying there's going to be some downtime, a very specific time in the middle of the night. Normally they try to make it somewhere, and we don't ever, when we're using Salesforce, it's quite a complex application. We don't ever go through upgrades, and we don't ever have to do testing of it. They just release it. It's what's known as continuous delivery, and whilst it's, as I was trying to acknowledge earlier on, tricky to do that in a complex environment like we're in, we believe it's possible. We're doing it now. With some decent sized organizations. It's a completely different mentality. We need to ensure that our product is able to drive the quality. And then that's why I was talking about confidence of the customer, because once you start building and delivering quality software, it takes away the need for the customer to have to accept it. Now, we know that the reason I call it the journey to SaaS is for a lot of organizations, it's going to take time to change that mindset. But it's a really good question, and we really believe it's possible. And Fabian's now.
Yeah, I would like to end up this webinar so on time. So thank you everyone for following us, and we will have a new webinar on Friday regarding the journey for the service model. So see you there.
Thank you everyone. Have a good day.
I feel it in my head, my shoulders, knees and toes, my bones, your music gets me through the highs and lows. My head, shoulders, knees and toes, my bones, you're keeping me from feeling all